Hey, welcome to another video for our shopping cart tutorial. We're building an app that will have persistence for our orders. So we're going to elect to use the session variable solution and not the database table here. But either way, we're going to have to create a cart object, and that is what we're doing in this video here. So we're going to create an object that will hold the items that a person has selected to buy. So we're going to do the coding behind the design here of our cart. So I'm going to make a few modifications here on the cart. So first of all, there is an item here called remove item. So it's actually redundant. If we have a set quantity item, we can set the quantity of an item to 0, which is the same as remove. So instead of doing a special case for set quantity, I'm just going to have set quantity. Also on the array called the subtotals, I've just modified the description here so that product ID and the associated number is subtotal. So that's a little bit different than the design I showed you in a previous video. One item here that I'm going to add is called the subtotal, or let's call it total price, and that will be a value like a float, and that will show us how much is the entire cart valued at. So it's just a handy calculation that we can use when we do our checkout process. All right, so we're ready to begin coding. I'm going into the folder called Model, where I have all the other objects in my program, and let's create a new PHP file, and we'll call this thing cart PHP. So the first thing we do is create the cart object. Now I'm going to set some private variables here, so that'll be our properties. So the first thing we do is set the user ID of who is logged in, and they will become the owner of this cart. The next item is actually a list called items, and we'll define it as an array. And in the comments, I'll say that this is an associative array of items in the cart, and I'll give you an example of what it's going to look like. So an associative array will have number pairs such as product ID followed by the quantity of items in the cart. So that will be an array. The next item I'm going to call subtotals, and that will also be an array. And the process that we'll do in creating this will be a calculated value. So the values are going to be the subtotals of each line item in our cart. So it'll be a product ID associated with the total cost for that product. The last item I'll create is a variable called total price. Now those are the 4 items that I'm going to have for properties. Now let's start to create some methods. So the first function that we're going to create is the constructor. Now the constructor, all it needs is a user ID. So it tells me who the person is that logged in. And then we're going to set all of these initial values to empty strings or empty arrays or 0. Now once we have all of the constructor done, let's choose the getters and setters and create those for all of the properties here. So we're going to have 4 getters and 4 setters. Now for some reason the constructor is at the bottom. I'm going to cut him and move him to the top. So he should be the first thing we see. So next let's create functions for our methods. Add item, and we'll take a product ID for which item we're going to add, and then update the quantity of that item so we can change that once it's been added to the cart. Now let's start adding some items to the cart. Let's attack this function first. I'm going to make an assumption here that the cart is empty. Assuming that the cart is empty is easy. That means we can add an item without having to worry about if it's already been counted once before. So in PHP you can add 2 arrays together. So I'm going to add the items array to itself, plus I'm going to create a new array, a new associative array, which is 1 pair of elements. It's going to be the product ID with an ID or the value of quantity of 1. So now that we have an add item function created, we need to test it out. So I'm going to create a new file here just for testing purposes. Let's call it cart test. So the first thing we need to do is set the autoloader in so we can use classes. I'm going to create a new value of cart, and let's associate it with user number 1, since we probably have an ID of 1 in our database for the users. You can use any number here you like if you don't like number 1. Now we need a product here, so let's go with product 1, and we're going to actually pull this out of the database. So I need to create the database service. So I need to create an instance of our product business service. So with that, we can create product number 1. So product 1 is going to be an item that we pull out of our database. So product business service, and let's do get or find, is it? Find by ID, and let's choose product number 11. And then let's make a couple other products. Okay, so I pull out 3 random products out of our database. Now I just want to know if those are actually valid, so I'm going to print them to the screen. Now when I print them to the screen, I'll use the HTML pre tag, and this just simply makes the printr function look pretty. It's kind of a trick for HTML. It'll put in the line breaks and spaces properly so that it's easy to read. So printr works on its own, but this works better. So I want to test out product number 2 and 3 to see if they look good. And let's save this. Now I'm going to go and test this in my browser. So you can see the URL that I'm typing here is a Milestone 4 business service model cart test. And so I'm just typing in the path directly to this file here inside of my models folder. We're going to delete this cart test later, but right now we can run it directly from its location, and we should see at least a couple of products. So it says here we have an array, and item 0 is another array. And it does show that we have the defibrillator, toaster, the Facebook profile, shower curtains, and baking soap. So it looks like it's pulling out of the database correctly. However, I've kind of cheated on my product service. I'm sending back arrays of 1 item. I should send back an actual object. So I'm going to modify my data service now and fix it to how it should be designed. So let's go look in product data service. This is where the items are pulled out of the database. So let's see, find product by name, delete item. I'm looking for the method called find by ID. Let's come down to the bottom here, and you can see I have some notes what I'm going to change. Right now, when the database is being queried, we run a while loop to see if we can get all of the items. And there should only be 1 item if we're searching for just a single ID number. When it returns the products array, it's returning me an array of 1 item, which isn't really what I want. I'm going to comment that out and instead use this command here, and we're going to define an object called product. So new product, and it's going to pull out each item. So the item 0 is the array, and it's the first item in the array. So product ID, product name, description, and so on all the way to the end. Let me change that to word wrap so you can see it, and that would be a different way to return. So instead of returning an array, I'm returning a new product object. So let's save that. I'm going to refresh my tester now and see what happens. So now you can see it's returning the same values here, but now each time I print R, I'm getting a object. So item number 11, and it's got all the information in the database now in object notation rather than array notation. Okay, so that's a fix to the product data service. Now back here, we've got ourselves a list of products here. We know they work, so I can probably just comment this out. We no longer need to test that. However, what I do need to test is my cart. So I have this variable called C, so $C, and I want to do an add to cart, add item, and product ID. So let's see, product ID 11. Let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to test to see what's in the cart. I'm going to echo pre, and then I'm going to print R with a cart variable, and then the close pre. Let's come back to our tester and refresh the page. Okay, so now you can see the results here. So the cart object has the user ID of person number 1. So that's the ID number of the person logged in. And then the items. The items has just 1 item in it so far. Product number 11 has 1 item in it. Let's test this out a little further. I'm going to add a couple of more. So let's copy and paste three of them here. So I'm going to add product number 15 and product number 5. Let's see what that looks like. And so now we have 3 items in our list. I have 11, 15, and 5. And it says I have quantity of 1 each. What would happen if I tried to add another one for 5, let's say? I want to add 2 product 5s, and I refresh the page, and you see it doesn't update. So we have to fix something. Let's go back and look at our cart and see why it doesn't work. We are assuming that the cart is empty, so that product 5 is assigned of 1 no matter what happens, even if it was already in the cart. So now I want to check to see if item 5 is in the cart, and if it is, then instead of just assigning it 1, we're going to add 1 to the cart. So I'm going to look for an if statement. Now the statement I'm looking for is called array key exists. Let's see what that's asking for. So it says give me the key value and then what array you're looking for. And this will tell me if that key is already in the array. How handy. So I'm going to say I want to check to see if product ID is in the item called this items. And if it is, then we know that the item is already in the cart. So we're going to say if it's in the cart, we'll add 1. If it's not in the cart, then we can use the previous statement that worked so well before, and we can just put that in the else clause. So if it's not in the cart yet, we'll set its quantity to 1. Well, if the item is in the cart, then we need to add. So we're going to take a items cart, or the items in our cart, and we want to get item that is set from products ID. And we want to add 1 to it. So let's say we're going to say that plus equals 1 is the way to increment a value by 1. Now let's come back to our tester and refresh. This time you can see that the add to cart gave us a second value for product number 5. That's because in the cart tester I have add items listed twice. I'm going to copy and paste again just to see if it is actually working. So we should be up to 4 items in the cart now, if that is correct. So yes, I refresh, and item 5 is now got a value of 4. Okay, so the cart test seems to be working for add item. We'll do update quantity in the next video, but for right now, it looks like we're well on our way to making our cart object work.